Okay, perfect. Well, thanks for having me this morning, or it's morning in the U.S., I guess it's afternoon there. But I'm going to speak about North Carolina State University and our entrepreneurship program, and then specifically get into the entrepreneurship clinic, which is one component, but a key component on how we teach entrepreneurship at NC State and how we engage our students and develop entrepreneurial thinkers. So before I start that, let me give you some background on North Carolina State. It's a public university in the state of North Carolina, founded in 1887. We're based in Raleigh, North Carolina, or many people across the world recognize us for the Research Triangle Park. It's about 1.5 million people living in our region. The university is made up of 35,000 plus students, about 2,000 faculty members. About 25,000 of those are undergrads and 10,000 students are graduates. We have over 300 degree programs, and that's represented inside of 3 colleges inside the university. And we are built on a think and do attitude, meaning we combine the engineering component to the acting component. We're a land grant university, which means that we teach, we research, and then we provide service to our constituents, which is the state of North Carolina and beyond. Our 12 colleges are represented here. We have the College of Agriculture, Design, Education, Engineering, Humanities and Social Sciences, Natural Resources. Our business school is the Management School, Sciences, Textiles, Vet Med, and then we have 2 general colleges on the graduate and university level. Inside of those colleges, 5 of them, Ag, Management, Textiles, Engineering, and the General University, has an actual entrepreneurship program. So we created the NC State Entrepreneurship Alliance to pull all of those programs together. We recognize the value of having entrepreneurship in those specific disciplines, and we wanted to create a more cohesive approach to entrepreneurship at NC State. And we do that through curricular programs, co-curricular programs, and then beyond as the students graduate and move on from NC State. Let me go over a couple of examples of each. So from the curricular standpoint, we have a major in entrepreneurship as well as a minor in entrepreneurship. This helps us bring students from across all disciplines and all colleges into the same classroom. On our graduate program, we have a concentration in entrepreneurship in our MBA program. And we also have the Technology, Entrepreneurship, and Commercialization program, where we work with our Office of Tech Transfer to commercialize technology that's developed in the labs on campus. We have a minor in our agriculture school, focused on agribusiness entrepreneurship. We have a minor in our music department, focused on arts entrepreneurship. Our computer science and engineering programs have an entrepreneurship track and an entrepreneurship engineers entrepreneurship program that focuses and replaces the senior design project, which is at typical engineering schools across the U.S. We also have a certificate in interdisciplinary entrepreneurship, which again brings students from across all programs. And then the Entrepreneurship Clinic, which is the locus of interaction of all of these, which I'll get into a lot more detail in just a second. From the co-curricular standpoint, we look at ways of getting students involved outside the classroom. So our advancement of women entrepreneurs focuses on how do we empower and recognize females on campus and give them tools where they can compete and become successful entrepreneurs. Our Albright Entrepreneurs Village is a living, learning village. Think of a dorm of all entrepreneurs living in it, on campus housing. Entrepalooza is our fall event, which celebrates our students, our alumni, and our startups that have come out of entrepreneurship. And we have a contest every fall for a quick pitch, and we give students money to build MVPs through that. Our Lulu E-Games and Make-a-thons happen throughout the year. Our Lulu E-Games are our spring event, our big business plan competition, if you will, but there's several tracks to it. We give over $100,000 in cash to students and student teams that win and compete in the Lulu E-Games. Our Entrepreneurship Garage is a physical space on our campus. It's a maker space with mentors, advisors, and we actually hold classes in the garage to spark innovation inside of our students. Our ambassador program is a group of students that go across campus telling other students about entrepreneurship and recruiting them to our pathway. Our mentor program provides students access to over 100 mentors that have launched and started companies from all different industries and all different age groups, provide them entrepreneurial advice, but also life advice at that young age. Our sustainability collaborative focuses on social entrepreneurship and how we can implement that in all businesses. And then our social innovation and entrepreneurship program recruits students into that social entrepreneurship aspect as well. After graduation, we have several programs to keep students and alumni involved. Our entrepreneurship network, Alumni Entrepreneurship Network, is our largest sector of our alumni association and is growing faster than any other. We gather alumni to discuss ideas, help hire graduates, help fundraise, and help spread the word. We run an accelerator for young alumni and seniors at North Carolina State by providing them money, as well as a 3-month accelerator where we prepare them to raise investments from the angel community in our area. The Chancellor's Innovation Fund is an actual fund managed by the university to invest in innovation created on campus in our labs, and then develop teams around them so we can build companies. Our acceleration fund is part of the Launch Accelerator, where we have we provide funding to those young startups, anywhere from $5,000 to $60,000 each summer, and prepare them for initial investment. We have an entrepreneurship initiative, Food for Food, where we focus on plant sciences as well as the supply chain for food. Our Miller Fellowship is funding that provides money to students after they graduate to pay rent, so they don't have to get a job and they can focus on their startup. Our Office of Research and Commercialization is the #2 office in the country behind MIT, with schools without medical programs in terms of patents and license. And then our Wolfpack Investor Network is an angel group of 150 alumni and friends of NC State that are accredited investors that invest in NC State-focused startups, meaning that the teams are either NC State alumni or the technology was developed on NC State's campus. I'm going to give you a quick overview of the clinic through this video, and then I'll go into more detail on each component of it.
The NC State Entrepreneurship Clinic is where students, companies, and faculty come to innovate together. The clinic is housed in one of the Triangle's largest co-working hubs, HQ Raleigh. The Entrepreneurship Clinic welcomes students from every major on campus. Students with diverse backgrounds are embedded into the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Early-stage startups, scaling businesses, and established companies alike can apply through our website to work with student clinicians. Our teams of clinicians pick company projects and engage with company leaders to build solutions to their specific business challenges. Clinicians meet with partner companies to identify the goals of their projects. Then, they create and execute on an action plan to tackle them. The mission of the clinic is to inspire and engage students who want to make a big impact by instilling an entrepreneurial mindset. Ultimately, this real-world experience prepares students to become better startup founders and team leaders at larger organizations. Learn more at entrepreneurshipclinic.ncsu.edu.
So before I go into the clinic, let me address the reason why we teach this way. There's really 3 components. I've been a professor at NC State for 18 years, and For that time period, most of my interaction has been with undergraduate students, but I also teach on the graduate level. But for the undergraduates and most young entrepreneurs, the three reasons that continually arise is the ideas that young entrepreneurs come up with are just really not that good, right? Our previous speaker, I caught the end of it, he was talking about jeans. Do we really need another pair of jeans, right? That's the concepts I'm thinking about, where students live inside of this college bubble, and all of their ideas are inside that college bubble. And if you look at campuses across the U.S. and across the world, for that matter, most of these concepts are the same, right? In the U.S., we have a lot of apps around paying bar tabs or laundry services for campus or food delivery services, all things that college students need. So the first reason of why we teach this way is how do we change that perception and perspective of what a good concept and a good idea is. The second component is most young entrepreneurs and students don't have a really strong network. Their network consists of other students, which is great in 20 to 40 years if they keep those connections. But at this stage, you need more access to mentors, advisors, investors, customers, and vendors. And so how do we change that aspect of entrepreneurship for the students? And then third, most young entrepreneurs lack the resources to launch a company. Even bootstrapping, they still lack access to capital to build that first MVP, build inventory, build the team, actually build the company. So addressing these three components, we built the entrepreneurship clinical model at NC State. And essentially what we did was we took the hospital teaching model and applied it to entrepreneurship education. So if you think about the hospital teaching model, what the model does is take a student, put them beside a doctor or nurse, and let them operate on a patient in real time. This experiential learning creates a better doctor and a better nurse. What we've done is replace that operating room with our co-working space and the entrepreneurship clinic, and we've replaced that doctor or nurse with real entrepreneurs. The clinic is actually located in HQ Raleigh, which is one of our largest co-working spaces in North Carolina. About 800 entrepreneurs call HQ Raleigh home. It's 5 locations in Raleigh. We're in the original location. The clinical model is essentially 3 components. It's the teaching component where we engage students in experiential learning and we embed them in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. By getting them off campus into this co-working space in downtown Raleigh, we create that network effect and we create that access to knowledge. Second, it's a physical space. It's a physical space to execute on their own ideas, meaning talking to customers and vendors, building out teams and building products and services. It's also a locus of interaction for us. It's where entrepreneurs and students and faculty can all meet and engage in this entrepreneurial thinking component. In addition to that, it's a research lab for us. NC State is a Research One university, so we do focus on research. And for our standpoint, we're focused on research that can help young entrepreneurs, building practical knowledge trees where we can then provide that information to entrepreneurial companies in our area as well as the students that we're working with. And we live in a specific part of the life cycle of a venture. If you think about the life cycle of venture, we start off with that idea of the aha moment. We launch, we raise, or we generate revenue, we grow, and then we become a large company if we're successful, right? And if you look at universities across the world, if you think about business schools across the world, most of them live in this area. Thinking about mature companies, and we create verticals of marketing, HR, finance, accounting, and most business schools are focused in this area. And then at those same universities, you'll see programs that are focused in entrepreneurship, and they typically are in this area where the old business plan writing component, where we go through ideation, we write a plan, and we get to launch. But most programs sort of stop here, right? We don't really do much for students after launch. And most people don't study or teach in the area of what happens after launch to revenue, or what happens after launch to fundraising. And there's a couple of reasons for that. It's risky for a young professor to focus their research time on these types of companies because of the failure rate. It's also really hard to teach because there's so much ambiguity and there's not one clean pathway for every startup to take. And this is where the Entrepreneurship Clinic really lives. How do we engage students in this space and teach them what it's like after that company has started? So we work with companies that have launched, for the most part that have launched, but haven't raised Series A funding. Those are our patients, if you will. Those partnerships, although most of them are going to be in this early stage launch and haven't received funding, we also work with larger companies like Wells Fargo, which is a national bank, or Under Armour, which would be similar to Nike or Adidas, all the way to Main Street companies like a coffee shop. We're not limited to companies just in North Carolina. We work with companies all across the country, California, Boston, Massachusetts, Texas, as well as companies all across the world. We work with companies out of Australia and Germany in the last 2 years. So it gives our students a really good perspective of what entrepreneurship is like in other parts of the world as well. In doing this, we're bridging the gap between the STEM schools and the business schools. I mentioned earlier there are 12 colleges at North Carolina State, the two largest ones being engineering, which is the largest, and the second largest being our business school, our College of Management. Those schools typically, and on most campuses, are siloed and don't interact with each other often. We've used the clinic to be able to bring in students as well as faculties from the engineering college as well as the business school to take classes together and to teach together. In fact, on Tuesday nights on a regular semester, I, a business professor, co-teach a class with an engineering professor in the Entrepreneurship Clinic, filled with half engineering students and half business students. It's a good way for us to combine our strengths of the university. Let me talk about the building blocks of our program. I'm just going to pull out our major in entrepreneurship from the business school so you get one perspective of how the clinic has changed the way we teach entrepreneurship. You know, a typical program, our program is not really that different than most programs in terms of the flow. We start with an intro to entrepreneurship in that freshman and sophomore year in college. Then we move into an opportunity analysis and creation class. Then students take 2 sister classes, New Venture Planning and Finance and Accounting for Entrepreneurs. And then we end in our practicum class. But if you step away from it, you look at our first 2 classes are really about exploration. How do we teach students to recognize better ideas and opportunities? And how do we lay that groundwork for entrepreneurial thinkers? The second component is really that planning stage. What do we do with this information, and how do we actually begin to execute on that, which leads into our launch phase. Students are graduating from the Entrepreneurship Clinic by taking this clinical practicum, and they're either going to go and join another company or they're going to launch their own company. And we want to give them the tools to be successful in doing so. So let me look at 2 of the classes. If you go back to this block, if you notice, the Entrepreneurship Clinic sits in this early class in the exploration phase, as well as in this launch class, our clinical practicum capstone class. So let's look at the first class is the opportunity analysis class, where we work on that first issue I raised about students not coming up with good concepts, but just traditional college problems. And then I'll talk about the clinical practicum, where we prepare students to launch their careers, whether it be a new venture or joining another company. In our opportunity analysis and creation class, we really focus on the 3 stages. The class is broken up into 3 stages. In the beginning, it's in a traditional classroom, like you would see in any business school across the U.S., where we focus on unsolved problems, gaps in the marketplace, and changes in the environment. And how can entrepreneurs take advantage of those by creating solutions or filling those gaps or utilizing those changes to develop a company around it. After we finish that first stage, which is typically 4 weeks, 4 to 5 weeks, we go into this clinical model sprint, where then the students leave the classroom and go into the entrepreneurship clinic, downtown Raleigh, away from campus, and work with real companies that exist in our ecosystem. In doing that, they begin to see what problems are they solving or gap they're filling, what changes are they taking advantage of, also what problems are they still facing or what gaps are they creating. Then we come back for the last 4 weeks of the class, and then we combine those two components. We combine that initial layer of problems, gaps, and changes with the clinical work they did, where they then go into ideation phase and try to develop their own concepts outside that college bubble. First thing, that bubble starts creating better concepts that have more scalability and more likely to succeed. This is really our entrepreneurial mindset beginning of development. It's also important to note this is the beginning of nurturing the network for them, developing mentors, advisors, as well as other companies that they can reach, other entrepreneurs that they can reach out to for advice. The next class, the clinical practicum, again, is our capstone class. It's 16 weeks of high-intensity clinical model for the students. It's completely downtown in the entrepreneurship clinic, off campus. We combine multiple disciplines in the clinical practicum. This semester, for example, we had 24 different concentrations. That was made up of agriculture students, engineering, business, accounting, design, textiles, the veterinary medicine, communications, and religious studies. It's open to all students to join into this class to develop this mindset. We build on experiential learning. We build on that original class they took 2 semesters earlier, and now they become leaders in this capstone class to work with these companies. It really helps strengthen the network, and it also creates a pathway for clarity for them. Also to note, it generates this feedback loop for students. I mentioned earlier that we're in HQ Raleigh, a co-working space in downtown Raleigh, North Carolina, with over 800 entrepreneurs in that space. If a student comes up with an idea or a problem, instead of spinning in place trying to solve it on their own, within minutes they have access to multiple people in the space to ask a question, get into a conversation to get feedback on it. So instead of spinning in place, which is typical lonely component of entrepreneurship, they spin forward, which means they get to an answer quicker, they get to a pivot quicker, or they get to the kill switch quicker on a concept. I want to walk through the clinical process just so you have a better understanding of how we're actually doing this and how the students interact. And it also shows how we're interacting with alumni and the entrepreneur ecosystem by working with these companies that are in our area. We first start with the application submission, where we have a running application window. Companies apply throughout the year, no matter whether we're in session or without. This becomes a data collection component for us, where we're able to understand where the company is in the life cycle, funding, where they are in revenue, what size team they have, and really how does it fit into the clinic, and how do we provide good value to the students. We're industry and geographic agnostic. As I mentioned, we work with companies all over the country and the world for that matter, and we work with all industries. Essentially, we do this because we have students from all different backgrounds and interests. We want to make sure that we have access for their learning as well. About 95% of the companies we work with are those new ventures that have launched but haven't raised Series A funding. And we do that for free. We work with those companies at no charge as a service, part of that land grant component. The other 5% are mature companies, larger companies, and this becomes an employee funnel for us. I'll talk about that in just a little bit in more detail, but it's a way for students to, for mature companies to recruit our students into them. It's also a funding model for us where we can charge a small fee for these larger companies to help operate the clinic through that funding model. Second, we focus on the project selection. So in the class, the teams interview each other, the students interview each other. They're looking for strengths and weaknesses and build their own teams. This is not a random assignment. This is not done by the professor. This is done by the students. We spend about 2 weeks on interviews and building out the knowledge of the class so the students have really good information in building those teams. Once those teams are formed, we give them access to the entire queue of applicants in the clinic. And they select based on their interests. It's not first in, first out. It's based on the student's interest. And they typically select based on 3 things. One would be the experience that they can gain from working with the company, or the experience that they can showcase by working with the company, or it might just be a really cool company and a cool concept. And I'm okay if that's the reason they're choosing the company, because they typically are working 9 to 10 hours a week in the clinic. And we don't want them to burn out. We want them to be excited and passionate about the project throughout the semester. So having some cool factor to it's not a bad idea. After they've decided on the company they want to work with, they then pitch to the class why they are the best team to work with that company. At that point, the class actually decides, are they the best team to work with the company? If we have multiple class teams pitching for the same company, the class decides which one is the best, and they're the ones that make that selection. Again, pairing the companies and the teams are important to be able to drive that energy throughout the 16-week semester that we live in. After the teams have been paired with the right companies, we begin with an initial consultation. That initial consultation is on site if possible. If the company doesn't have an actual physical location, it might be held in the clinic, or if it's not located geographically close, then we would hold a Zoom or a WebEx meeting with those companies. This is typically an hour-long meeting with the students and the entrepreneur, and it's a brain dump. They're trying to get as much information as possible from the company. Why did they start? What problems do they have? What project do they want the students to work on? Why? And really to match up. Are the problems they identified really the problem that needs to be worked on, or should we back up a couple steps? This meeting is led by the clinicians. Faculty are not engaged in this meeting. It's completely led by the clinicians and the students. And it defines the scope of the project. It helps us set expectations on both sides of the equation, for the entrepreneur and the company we're working with, as well as the students, to make sure that we're setting realistic as well as challenging expectations. This is a learning activity and it needs to be rigorous in that component. After we've gone through that initial consultation, we then develop the action plan and sign off on that action plan. The action plan essentially is a roadmap. What are the students going to do from this day forward to the end of the project? It creates accountability between the team and the company. Both have to engage. Remember that hospital teaching model where the student is standing beside the nurse or the doctor to operate on the patient? We need the entrepreneur engaged throughout the program. It can't be something they're just handing off to the students to work on their own. It needs to be something that they're getting feedback throughout the entire time. So it creates this accountability amongst both roles. It also helps define the roles of the students and explicitly define that they're not interns. This is not an internship program. This is an actual class. They're receiving class credit for it. And there's class built around the projects that they're working on. And for that matter, the companies can't treat the students as interns and might give them menial tasks. It's more about the thought process that we're developing in the student. The action plan also is our starting point of how do we define what does the team or the class need? What resources can the clinic or the faculty provide the students as they tackle this project? It sets the timeline and the logistics. How are we going to meet? How often are we going to meet? What are we going to work on? and then it identifies those outcomes and deliverables as well. Back to that, after the action plan is written, it goes to the faculty member as well as the entrepreneur, and all three parties, the students, the faculty member, and the entrepreneur, have to agree on the action plan before anything starts. And then we go into full workload. So the projects typically last 4 to 8 weeks. We work in 4-week sprints for a couple of reasons. One, it prevents procrastination, and it gives us more flexibility from a class standpoint. I don't have to go out and look for projects that are perfectly 8 weeks to fit inside of a semester. We can do projects that are shorter or longer, and using these weekly journals and updates, we're able to collect this information and be able to provide it to the next group if it's a longer project, or we're able to shorten a project and then go into another project for the students. It's a continuous feedback loop for us. The students fill out these weekly journals, and we use that information to understand what we need to teach in the class the following week. It also gives us a chance to see problems that arise. Everybody that's been in a college class or taught a college class realizes that not all teams are created equal, and not all team members are created equal. And this gives us a chance to recognize what problems they're facing and how to address them quickly versus losing a couple of weeks or even a semester on a project. We're also using these weekly journals and updates to prevent scope creep, to make sure that the students are on task and make sure that the entrepreneurs and companies that we're working with are not just adding tasks to the action plan without really vetting, does it add educational value, and does it help with the entrepreneurial mindset development? Again, it creates accountability. If the journals are not completed, then we know there's a problem. And if each student is not participating in the weekly journal, we know there's a problem, and we can address it immediately. And this is also how we manage and record our clinic hours and know that the students are working throughout the semester. Then we get to project completion, and that can look different for lots of different projects that we work on, but at the end of the project, it's a comprehensive file. It's not a surprise to the companies we're working with because they're meeting with them weekly, so they know what's happening, but it's something that we can hand over to the companies and they can use moving forward. We finish with a final presentation and those recommendations for the company with their feedback. We also collect an exit survey where we measure our NPS and the value to the company, an actual monetary value they put on it. And then we generate a student portfolio and a story for the students that they can use in a job interview or raising funding for their own startup. And after they've gone through the entire clinic process, the students then launch. They're going to launch their own career. Again, that might be their own new venture, or it might be joining another company. So let's look at that for a second. If you think about now, the students have gone through this ideation and exploration phase. They've gone through the traditional planning and customer discovery phases, and now they're ready for graduation, which leads to two different paths. 80% of our students join an existing firm. In doing so, they immediately add value. They're thinking differently than the traditional accounting student or marketing student or engineer by recognizing problems, understanding how to build solutions, articulating that to the right person, whether it be their manager or innovation board, and then adding that value immediately creates them better employees. It also generates this opportunity for companies to work with a clinic and create an employee funnel. Step back a second and think about the clinical model where we work with companies and entrepreneurs for 4 to 8 weeks. That 4 to 8 weeks becomes an interview process, essentially. Traditional interviews are an hour where the person hiring someone is asking questions, the student is answering, how they think they want to answer. And then after that hour, it's a coin flip. It might be a good match, but you really don't know. You're basing it on a resume and an hour-long interview. Versus our students are working beside these companies for 4 to 8 weeks. So the companies get to see what's the work ethic of the student. How do they fit into the company culture? What's their potential inside the company? What value are they bringing to the company on day one? The added benefit to that is that the students also get to see what's the company culture, what's the potential inside the company, what value are they bringing into the company, how sustainable is the company. So at the end of our process, if there's a fit, it's typically a really good fit. So we're eliminating a lot of the early turnover that those young graduates generally participate in by placing them in the right company on day one. This has actually led to more companies wanting to work with the clinic, knowing that this becomes an employee funnel to join either their new startup or a larger company like Wells Fargo or Under Armour. In addition to that, about 20% of students are going to actually go and launch their own company. And they need resources for that. Most of our students are young and resource constrained, as in most students, but our students at NC State are typically coming from rural backgrounds or blue-collar families where access to funding is not as readily available. So we provide several resources for them to launch. One is funding. I mentioned the Acceleration Fund in the beginning of my presentation, where students can apply and receive anywhere from $5,000 to $60,000. We also have the Wolfpack Investor Network, where over 150 angel investors invest in startups. Our typical investment is somewhere around $250,000 to $300,000, with the last 4 being around over $500,000. We also provide them other assets like space. Students can work out, or alumni can work out of the entrepreneurship clinic even after they've graduated. So it's a place for them to put the stake in the ground and launch their own company. We also provide them access to people, whether it be other alumni, mentors, advisors, opening doors for customers or vendors or other investors. And then we provide them assets like lab space, maker space products like 3D printers or sewing machines or databases, and essentially giving them that leg up so they can launch their own company. This has also been, our clinic is 5 years old now, and we've been recognized by the United States Association for Small Business and Entrepreneurship, winning the Excellence in Co-Curricular Innovation in 2018, the Emerging Entrepreneurship Program in 2017, and Outstanding Workshop in Pedagogy in 2016. Last year, we were recognized by the Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities, winning the highest award in Economic Engagement Connections Award. And then before the clinic, we had never been ranked in entrepreneurship from a university level. Since then, the Princeton Review has ranked our graduate program number 21 in the country for graduate programs, and we're now number 10 for undergraduate programs in the country. And with that, I'd like to open it up to any questions that you guys might have. I can dig into any component of that in more detail.
Thank you for the lecture. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat area. Just to start this question session, I have one regarding the student projects. What are the type of this project? Are they mostly software projects, hardware projects, from what sphere, finance, I don't know, IoT or something else?
Yeah, great question. So the projects are from all industries and all different disciplines, but I'll give you a couple of good examples. So we do a lot of projects on customer discovery or validation, where a company or a young company has has launched. They have a few customers, but they're not sure if they're reaching the right customer. So the students will then go out and interview their current customers and then go interview new potential customers and get feedback, and then use that feedback to develop the next product for the company. So that we do a lot of those types of customer discovery validation projects. But we also do prototyping and development using the engineering side of the school. So not a technical prototype, but we worked with a company, speaking of jeans, we worked with a company in the denim space, and they had a new idea for a new product. I can't get into the product because we're still under NDA, but they had a new idea for a product. So the students went into their textile labs and built prototypes, and then showed them to customers to get feedback, and then gave those prototypes to the companies. So it's everywhere from that customer discovery ideation component to actually building prototypes and then testing them with the potential companies.
Mm-hmm. So it depends completely on the company they are working with at the moment. Mm-hmm.
It does depend on the company they're working with, and also the skill set of the students.
Mm-hmm.
And that helps in choosing the right companies that they want to work with.
Thank you. I guess, what are the best results of your students and your clinic? Maybe you have some very interesting success stories. Yeah.
I can give you a couple of examples. Again, about 80% of our students are going to go join another company, an existing company. And that's success for us if we get those students to join the right company. I'll give you one example of Wells Fargo. I'm not sure if you know Wells Fargo in the Ukraine, but it's a large national bank. It's over 150 years old. And that big bank wanted to hire more entrepreneurial-minded students. But if you ask a 22-year-old that's studying entrepreneurship, they don't look at a bank as a place to land and want to work afterwards. So Wells Fargo came to us, provided a project that the students could work on. We started out that project by asking the students, would you want to work at Wells Fargo after graduation? All 4 of the students that worked on this project said no, don't want to go work for a bank. Then we worked on the project for a semester in the financial technology industry, basically studied ATMs and then designed what the new ATM would look like. At the end of that project, we asked all 4 students, would you want to work at Wells Fargo? All 4 said yes. All 4 had job offers from Wells Fargo. So that's a success for us in terms of working with a partner company and help recruiting the right students into their programs. From the student standpoint, it changed their perspective of, yes, Wells Fargo is a big, old bank, but inside of Wells Fargo, you can still be entrepreneurial. And there's plenty of money there. And instead of pitching to an investor, it's more about convincing a manager or an innovation board to invest in their concept. So that would be one example of a good result and a good result for us. Another would be, we had 2 students that went through our program that recognized an opportunity to replicate the model of Dollar Shave Club. I don't know if that's outside the US, but Dollar Shave Club, where it's a monthly subscription model where they send razors. They took that model and developed it around air filters, home air filters, and now they employ 40 plus people. They have a large office in downtown Raleigh. They've raised lots of money I can't disclose, and their revenue is very high. So we have, those are 2 different situations where students went and joined an existing company, and then students launched their own company.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And the last one, do you think ENTREPRENEURSHIP clinic changes the future of students? And do you think if the creation of the clinic influences the image of the North Carolina State University?
Yeah, so yes to both. And I can talk about for the future of the student. So we've been running the clinic for 5 years. And since then, we've had about 1,000 students go through the clinic. And couple things we're measuring are where are the students landing, and are they landing in the right job? So all of our students are either launching or landing in a job. They're not unemployed. So that's one thing that we're measuring as a success. We also are measuring how engaged are the students after they graduate. So this last semester, we did 50 projects in the clinic. About 20 of those projects were driven by alumni of the clinic, meaning they went and worked with a company and then brought a project back into the clinic, or they went and launched a company and brought a project back into the clinic. So that's a test for us to show that they saw value in their experience as a student to then come back into the clinic as an alumni and an entrepreneur and be the doctor instead of the student at that stage. In terms of recognition and image for NC State, absolutely. Before the clinic, we were rarely recognized for entrepreneurship, and that comes to their rankings. Bjorka asked the question, I went to Moldova last year. If we hadn't started the clinic, it's unlikely I would have been invited and met you in Moldova last year. And then speaking in this, those are two good examples of how we're increasing our brand awareness and the method that we're using. We also have seen other colleges use our model as well. So earlier this year, we had 20 different universities join us in Raleigh to learn more about the clinic, and now 4 or 5 of them are implementing that this fall, and then we're working with them as well. For me, I look at that as a great opportunity for our students at North Carolina State to also work with students at other universities. So whether it's in Moldova or Ukraine or in Alabama or New Jersey, we have students working with other students on these projects, and then the projects can be sourced from those other places as well.
Hey, Luis.
Hey, Andre, how are you?
Very, very nice to meet you here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great presentation, and thank you. It was inspiring again.
Thank you.
I also have a question, one question for you, because, you know, we already piloted last year this case with challenges from companies, and students were like trying to solve these problems. But we have we've got one problem and challenging for us. Students don't have hard skills. They make and create great ideas, and companies really was really satisfied about ideas. But then when we will go to the process, to the prototyping and validation, we have not enough mentors time from the company, and we need to create prototype with students' abilities, and they have very poor hard skills.
Yeah.
So, like we struggle with this point and have not good experience with prototyping. Good ideas, but not prototypes. So how do you solve this? Probably you can involve more hard skills from companies, or probably you have some methods for this. What do you think?
Yeah, so we've gone a couple routes on this. One is looking for the strengths across the university, and that's why we brought in our engineering students and design and textile students, who typically do have those hard skills and can build the prototypes. However, if you don't have that component of your university, that doesn't help you, right? So I've worked with a college in Alabama that also is mainly a business school without the typical STEM hard skills that you're talking about. So what they have done is look for other partners, which ends up being community colleges for them, and then using those other students to then join them inside that classroom or use them as a resource to build the prototypes. So convincing that other professor at the community college that we're going to feed you projects that you can build prototypes on, your students get access to these cool projects, and then we'll combine those to go out. The third way we've done it is by partnering with other companies that do have those skill sets. So if the students are developing the idea but can't build a prototype, then we have a design firm or a design company that then can help the students build it. And typically we're looking for younger companies that need to help build out their portfolio, and we become a platform for them to build out the portfolio. We can give credibility to the company because now they're working with North Carolina State students. And we can provide those companies access to our students and eventually those companies we're working with, which becomes a customer pipeline for them as well.
Thank you. Thank you. We have another one question. Ksenia will ask you. I just would like to add shortly that probably if we will pass this pandemic and quarantine stuff, we will see Luis in autumn in offline in Kyiv. So let's keep in touch.
I hope so. I was supposed to be there this week. I look forward to coming later this year, hopefully.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And the last one before the break, how do you build connection with company to make them ready to work with students?
Yeah, so that hasn't been a problem for us because of how big North Carolina State is. Again, 35,000 students, that generates 500,000 alumni. So that component wasn't as tough. But when I'm dealing with other colleges that are smaller, a couple things that would work. One is getting off campus, right? So it creates awareness off campus to those companies. So it doesn't mean you got to build a clinic inside of a co-working space off campus. I know there's some really cool co-working space. I haven't been to Kyiv yet, but in Moldova, we saw some cool co-working spaces there. Like have a desk, have office hours, either with the students or faculty in those spaces to let them know that this is available and an asset to the community. Social media has been great for us, either through Twitter or mainly Twitter, but Twitter or Facebook, letting people know that the students are working on projects and what type of results are happening. And then we use our marketing department at the university and the colleges level to help tell our stories. So we write stories about successes of our students and the companies that come to the clinic, and then that begins to get recognition with other companies in the area, and then that just becomes a free fall. And we also measure, once you get a couple of companies, they continue to come back. Over half of our companies that we work with submit another project. So that just sort of becomes the domino effect afterwards.
Thank you.